Copy. Right, that link should be live on my group now. See if it works.
Looks like it did. Let's see.
Can you see yourself?
I can't. Can you see me?
Sent to everybody. Should be there now.
Okay, let's keep going. It says my browser doesn't recognize a video format. Oh, well.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, should I try to go to Firefox?
Yeah, you could try Firefox, yeah. Let's see if everything's going.
I guess I could try Google Chrome after that.
Yeah, it should be up and running correctly.
Now I see myself.
Ah, you got yourself.
Yeah.
Right.
I guess I could try Google Chrome after that. Wow,
Yep.
There's like a 5-second delay.
Up and running correctly.
Now I see myself.
So probably turn the volume down and just look at the questions, if that makes sense.
Okay, volume's down.
Yeah. Volume down and just look at the questions, if that makes sense.
The volume's down.
Yeah. Right, all the links are just getting posted, and then we should see some activity. Okay. Right. Getting posted, and then we should see some activity.
Mike, I got a question from James Mintram, and then I'm doing good, but I got to tell you guys, this is really going to freak me out. I'm getting like a 20-second delay.
Yeah, the delay is a bit annoying. I don't know why that is happening, but yeah, I know James. James is a follower of the group.
This is really going to freak me out. I'm getting like a 20-second delay. It feels like I'm on the moon. Anyway.
Yeah, the delay is a bit annoying. I don't know why that is happening, but yeah, I know James. James is a follower of the group.
You could probably hear the echo of when the sound is finally coming back through. Okay, so James said, what's my most memorable sortie in a Tomcat? You could probably hear the echo of when the sound is finally coming back through. Okay, so James said, what's my most memorable sortie in a Tomcat? Well, one of my real most memorable ones was the time when I was flying with Jaws, and this was in 1982, and we were participating in this training program called Rising Fighter, which is where we had two F-14s against anywhere from 2 to 6 F-4 Phantoms. And these were Navy Fleet Phantoms, probably F-4Ns or F-4Ss. And both the F-14s and the Phantoms were armed with AIM-9s and AIM-7s. And the Phantoms were just told, go out there and fight a good, hard fight. And the Tomcats, the same thing. And the purpose was the Phantoms were simulating floggers. 1982, flogger was new, still didn't know a lot about them. And so we were doing, I guess we did 1 or 2 of these sorties a day. I would have to look at my notes. But the best one that I flew was when we were doing a 2 versus 6. And on the run-in, we shot one of the Phantoms, and it was kill removed. But they shot our wingman, and he was kill removed. So when we get to the merge, it was a 1v5. And Jaws and I had already been through Top Gun together. We were very candid with each other. We worked well together. My radar skills were good. His flying skills were good. And so we had a great 1v5 engagement. Now, I've got 2,500 F-14 hours. I've got a lot of other memorable times. And in fact, I mean, before I forget, that story is in this book. So I go over all in detail about things that we did in the cockpit, things that helped us to succeed, and stuff like that. I got a lot of other memorable episodes. For example, when I launched a Phoenix and VF2 and other things like that. But that one is really the one that comes to mind as possibly the best of my, one of the most memorable of my entire career. Okay, so it looks like my signal here is recycling. Let me see what's going on. Good time to refresh.
Well, it looks like James will be buying a copy of your book.
And what's that, Mike? I had the volume turned way down.
It looks like James will be buying a copy of your book.
Oh, yeah. Nice. Yep. So did my video image freeze for you, or is it still good?
It's good for me, yeah. But how does it look out on the live chat? Can you tell us what it's like? Is it lagging or?
Oh, you know, I only know what I'm seeing. I got another question from Declan Moreland. Did I ever get to go low level in the lakes, UK? And then Declan says it's still good. So thanks, man.
Perfect. Cheers, Declan. I
have never flown an F-14 in Europe. On the other hand, that doesn't mean we didn't go low level in other places. Some of my most memorable fights were, okay, and thanks, James, no lag. That's good to know also. Okay, so you want to talk about low level. I mean, I see these fantastic photos now of tornadoes and hawks and strike eagles and virtually everything flying super low level up in some valley up in Scotland, I think, and then other guys flying out in canyons out in the western United States. And I go, you know, that's really cool because any low level is fun. When I was flying, there were basically nobody was out there taking pictures of us, which is probably good. But my low-level flights were, we did some low level in the F-14. I mean, out over water, we would go, you know, very low, probably 50 feet, 90 feet. In fact, one of my earliest low-level flights was very early in my career when I was about 2 months after I got to VF-24, and we were assigned to escort a Harpoon missile. And the reason they needed Tomcats to escort these things is because the data package in the Harpoon did not have heading information. And so they launched the Harpoon and they got all kinds of telemetry, but they just couldn't tell what the heading was. And they wanted to make sure it was flying to the target. So they needed jets to fly alongside it, manned jets to fly alongside it and make sure that it was heading towards the target. So that made us, we were flying down around 100 feet or less and going at about 540 knots, 500, 540, which is nice and fast, but it was over water. Then a few months later, I got to fly some low-level flights overland. Later on, when I was a Top Gun instructor, we would sometimes take the F-5s down low when we had free time and the class wasn't around and we could just fly around on the jets. You know, for example, we get there, get to the range early, fly low. After the class flight was over, we'd fly low on the way back to Yuma to refuel. So yeah, we did some low flying. And I used to think about possibly going up to a mountain and taking pictures of some of these guys. So I was thinking about that, but I never followed through on it. Okay, so let's see. What was the F-14 like to fly off carriers? 14 hours. I've got a lot of other memorable times. And in fact, I mean, before I forget, that story is... Wait a minute. Okay, here we go. I need to refresh my browser. Like to fly off carriers. Okay, I think my delay is virtually going away. The carrier, it was great to fly the F-14 off carriers because For one thing, it had excellent endurance. And, the carrier was all based on the cycle. That's how it was most efficient, was a standard cycle. And that was, when I was there, it was 1 + 45, an hour and 45 minutes. And so the F-14 with 16,000 internal, with 4,000 in external, so we had 20,000 pounds of total fuel. We could fly a 1 + 45 cycle without too much trouble and have enough gas to do a little bit of maneuvering, although you never had as much gas as you really wanted. If we could just get 1,000 or 2,000 pounds from the tanker, then we would really feel like we were doing a lot better. We could light the burners for ACM, things like that. Okay, another thing around the F-14, and I got to say up front, I've only been to the carrier in F-14s, but I flew with guys who were F-8 pilots at the carrier, F-4, and then of course we watched Hornets and all the other jets and the E-2s and everything. I think the F-14 was a handful for the pilot on the ball because it had a lot of moving surfaces. It had relatively heavy stick forces. It was a complex airplane to fly. The positive was its approach speed at about 134 knots. That was good. You weren't barreling in at 150, and you might think 15 knots is a little bit, but when you're coming into land at a speed like that, then 15 knots is nice. The one thing that I understand they did was they put in the digital flight control system, DFCS, late in the F-14's career, and I think that fixed or improved a lot of its handling characteristics behind the ball, behind the ship on the ball. One of my squadron mates, pilot friend Paul Nickel, he wrote a couple of nice articles about being a junior officer pilot in the F-14 as well as the F-16, and I think those show up on the drive.com website. So a couple more questions came in. Another one is, what did I fly? Did I fly A's, B's, or D's? The vast majority of my career was in the A model. So I flew with TF-30s and AWG-9s the whole time. But I actually did a little bit of training in the B model when I went back through the F-14 rag in 1996. And the good thing was it had the B model still had the AWG-9, but it had the improved engines. The bad thing was that was a period of time when F-14 Bs and Ds were restricted from selecting afterburner. There'd been a series of mishaps. They were all associated with lighting afterburners. And so while the Navy was investigating that and looking for a fix, we weren't allowed to use afterburners. So here I am flying an F-14B and limited to military power. On the other hand, even from the back seat, by the seat of your pants, by the seat of my pants, I could feel this was a significantly more powerful jet. And I just wish that the Navy had been able to buy those bigger engines from the start of the Tomcat's career. That was one thing that, and I might have said this before, Mike, when we were talking.
Yeah.
The ultimate Tomcat, in my opinion, came very late in the plane's career and was only produced in a few numbers. That was the F-14D with the upgraded radar, the more powerful engines, and digital flight controls. But at least it went out with the strongest performance. Okay, so another question. How complicated is it to attain top speed or ceiling in the F-14? Okay, so let me ask you guys, or let me tell you guys right up front. These are good questions, so you're doing good. I understand it's 7 o'clock over there. It's a little bit earlier over here, but at least it's after lunch, so I'm good. In terms of F-14 top speed and ceiling, one thing to know is that the F-14 was not a high altitude jet. I think the highest I went was maybe in the high 40s, and I knew a couple of guys that went up to into the 50s, but they were always scared about the engines and the TF-30s is what I'm talking about. So it wasn't really a high altitude jet, and the service ceiling wasn't even that impressive. It was around 50,000 feet. In terms of speed, however, the F-14 was good, could pretty easily go above 800 and even 900. And that may not sound like, big numbers, but, Mach 1.3 and higher is starting to get up there. And again, that was easy to get to. The fastest I ever went was around 1,200 miles per hour. And our biggest concern then was that we had not really planned ahead of time to go out and see how fast we could go. So we flew an entire maintenance profile check flight. So we burned most of our, or a lot, not most, but a lot of our fuel doing this post-maintenance check flight. And then the pilot goes, let's see how fast we can get this thing. I said, okay. So we're up at 30 to 35,000 feet. He goes to zone 5, and we are flying away from NAS Miramar. Well, what I'm doing is I'm watching the fuel gauge go down and the distance to the field increase. And so I'm sitting there in my mind calculating, geez, how much is it going to take us to get back? Because we're flying away at more than 10 miles a minute as we're steadily accelerating. Anyway, we got to, like I said, around about 1,200 miles an hour. I got it written down somewhere. And then we said, okay, that's all we're going to get, and we're out of gas, so we need to go back. So I know that if we had put a little bit more thought and planning into it, and if we had just committed ourselves to getting top speed, we could have started doing that from the start of the flight, been closer to land, had more fuel to accelerate with, gotten a higher speed. On the other hand, we could have gotten into more trouble too, so who knows? Okay, let's see. I can't talk about it. I'm not sure. I think that means can't talk about the low altitude flights. Well, what was my most memorable time in combat? Okay, James, that's a question. I got to tell you, in 2,500 F-14 hours and about 12 years of squadron flying, whatever it was, my combat time consisted of flying Operation Southern Watch over Iraq, the Southern No-Fly Zone. Most of my flying time in the F-14 was in the 1980s. There was precious little combat in the 80s. And so I don't have a bunch of combat stories that I can tell you with. Southern Watch was pretty interesting. A couple of things that I recall was that the execution of everyone on Southern Watch was very professional. Everything was a high standard. There was a lot of Navy, Air Force, some Marine Corps, and some allied nations or coalition countries. So there was a lot of different services and forces, and everybody had to be coordinated. And I thought it was coordinated very well. It demanded us to be very professional on all of our flights. We did a coordinated strike with maybe 40 or 60 airplanes, and it was radio silent, and everyone was where they were supposed to be. Everything went on time. It was very impressive from a aviation standpoint. On the other hand, I spent a lot of time diligently scanning my scan volume on my radar and looking outside, because I didn't want to be the one joker who got surprised by a brave Iraqi pilot who was trying to bag a coalition airplane in 1997 and 98. That didn't happen. We were out there with our AIM-54s. We were hoping they would do something to break the line, but they did not. The Iraqi Air Force did not break the Southern No-Fly Zone when I was there. Okay, someone else asked, do I do many book, print signings for enthusiasts? I do some of that. I'll tell you, the one of the big concerns is if I mail books to Europe, the postage is like $22. So that adds a lot to the cost of everything. But if someone wants one, they can contact me. Most of my book signings are, I go to the Udvar Hazy Museum, which is the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum near Dulles. I go there about once or twice a month, and I meet a lot of interesting people, have a great time talking, telling flying stories, answering questions, and signing books. So that's where I do a lot of my book signing and interacting with enthusiasts. Okay, I got another question. Did anyone ever fail the Top Gun class? No, that's a good question, and it makes me think about when I was writing my first book, Top Gun Days. I really tried to focus on the positive because, I mean, we figured this is normal life. There were negative things. People had personal problems and stuff like that. But one of the shortcomings of the Top Gun class was that at that time, back in the 80s, there was no real provision for sending a student home from the class. And I remember when I was there as an instructor, just once or twice we'd have a student, and I'm talking about 2.5 years, so seeing dozens and dozens of people come through. But once or twice we'd have someone come through, and we'd go, they're not really that good. They're not doing a good job in the class, and they weren't unsafe. But we were going, the instructors wished that there was some way to send people home. So a couple of years ago, I asked a more recent Top Gun instructor, and he said that nowadays there is provision for sending people home from the Top Gun class, and I think that's appropriate. And I also think it's probably easier because the Navy has made a lot of progress in establishing clear performance standards, in standardizing evaluations and other things like that, and in most cases, people meet them, and people are happy to meet the standard. So I think the Navy has done themselves a favor by making things clearer. Okay, so let's talk about, somebody asked about the inverted flight with the F5. So that's where, let's see, how did it go? Was it like this? Oh, no, wait a minute. Oh, yeah, that's how it was, like this. It's been a couple of days since I watched Top Gun, so I might have forgotten. So this was kind of based on the idea that when Navy fighters intercepted other aircraft, sometimes they would like to. Guys talked about doing a lot of things. They wanted to show off. Every once in a while, when we'd leave, we'd light the burners and climb away and stuff like that. When we terminate our escort. And so what you have is you've got a couple of screenwriters who have good imaginations, and you've got a couple of Navy pilots, advisors who are saying, yeah, let's make this an exciting movie. And so they came up with that maneuver. In terms of actually filming it, they did try to film it. They had, and in fact, in the movie, you can see the F-14 flies inverted next to the F-5 for a couple of seconds. But everyone quickly realized that there was no way to do it safely, especially to get the canopies as close as they wanted them in the movie, so you could see the people in there. And if you look, you'll see that the tails are going to cause some interaction, and that would not be good. So that was a special effect, or it was a post-filming. They inverted the image of the F-14, and that was as good as it got. And I got to tell you, I mean, for filming Top Gun, there was very little of that trick stuff, and so I've got to hand it to them for putting together a movie with so much dynamic flying, and that was almost all real. A small diversion. Yesterday, I went to see the movie Dunkirk, where you've got Spitfires in combat with other airplanes. And they did a nice job with the aerial combat in that movie. I mean, and the Spitfire, of course, is a beautiful airplane. Always will be. Okay, how did you feel in the moments after the aforementioned strike, particularly when you got back to the ship? Let's see. I'm not sure what strike we're talking about. How did it affect you knowing that there may have been folks on the ground? I think we're talking about flying the no-fly zone over Iraq, but
Yeah.
nobody did any shooting when I was there. So James, you're going to have to write a little more to remind me of what I was talking about, I guess. Okay, have you ever flew against F-15s, 1v1 or 2v2 from Steve? Yeah, I did fly against F-15s. Thanks, Steve. That the F-15 was an incredible airplane. You know, it was a couple of years newer than the Tomcat, and of course they benefited from their more powerful engines, but also it didn't have quite the mission range that the F-14 did when it was designed. And I got to be clear. I mean, I hear people occasionally try to pigeonhole the F-14 as an interceptor, but the F-14 was very definitely designed as a fighter, and it had the ability to do the Fleet Air Defense mission with the AUG-9 and the Phoenix. Okay, so anyway, so when the F-14 is flying against the F-15, if the F-15 pilot was any good, I'll just say it, we had our hands full because it's a very capable airplane. On the other hand, a well-flown F-14 that was properly configured and was using all of his advantages, you know, it could be a pretty decent fight. And of course, we all have our examples and our situations, our recollections of where we shot the other guy. I mean, I've been in airplanes that were in maneuvering dogfights with F-15s, and my airplane shot F-15s, gunned them, shot an AIM-9, and I've been shot by F-15s, which is no fun. So, yeah, we fought F-15s 1v1 and 2v2. It was excellent training for us. Somebody asked if I was at the infamous tailhook convention. Laugh out loud. Good question. I had actually been to the tailhook the year before, the infamous year. And when I went the year before, I took my wife with me because by that time, a lot of guys were taking their wives and stuff like that. And then the year after, when they had the problems, I did not go to that one, which I'm glad I didn't go because it sure made my life much simpler, just not even being, you know, in the list of people that were out there. You know, that was an embarrassing incident. I don't want to talk very much about it, but it sure was embarrassing. That, to their credit, the Tailhook Association has definitely kept their eye on their mission, on the big picture. They never have lost their enthusiasm or their commitment. The Tailhook Convention still goes on. It's a tremendous event, and if you ever find yourself in Reno around early September, you ought to try to attend the Tailhook Convention because it's just amazing. Oh, what was your worst moment in the F-14? Did you ever have any engine failures or control issues? Thanks for that question. It's very easy for me to remember my worst moment. And if anyone on the line is a pilot or an air crew, then you may be able to relate to this. My worst moment came when I was a squadron commander. So this was 1997. We were flying F-14As. We were flying from Virginia Beach to San Diego to begin our deployment. We had aerial refueled once. And halfway there, my airplane had a series of indications that were classic indications in the F-14. We had what's called a bleed air, I believe it was bleed air light, which was a caution light. We got a little bit of smoke in the cockpit. The air conditioner stopped working. And let me tell you, in a jet fighter, an air conditioner is not like the AC in your car. The air conditioner in most fighters these days is, closely tied to the engine, and it's critical to avionics, cooling, and functioning. So the air conditioning is really called ECS, Environmental Control System. It's critical. So we had this problem. F-14s had been lost because problems like this led to the turbine, the ECS turbine, catching fire, causing a fire in the airplane. And there had just very recently been a revision of the procedures and a reiteration. Look, this is a dangerous situation. So my pilot and I, as soon as we had this problem, we told air traffic control we're declaring an emergency. We diverted to Cannon Air Force Base, New Mexico, which was the nearest military field. And we told our wingman, stay with us. You don't always have to take your wingman with you, but if you're having an emergency, it's good to have somebody with you. And so the reason that this emergency was my worst one was that it lasted like 15 minutes. And so, excuse me, my nose itches. It lasted like 15 minutes. In contrast to my ejection emergency lasted like 1.5 seconds. This ECS thing, we're sitting there and I start preparing for ejection. And it's just a terrible feeling when you're sitting there thinking, I may have to jump out of this. I may have to, we don't want to mess up any of our troubleshooting or dealing with this emergency. So in the end, we landed at Cannon Air Force Base. When we got out of the jet, I went over to the side panel, and through the panel, it was too hot to hold my hands on. You could feel the heat. So, we were on the verge of having a fire. It would have caught fire eventually, but we got it on the ground in time. The good thing was, okay, James, I got your further question. The good thing was that our wingman was there. As a squadron commander, I needed to be in San Diego. So I told the wingman, Rio, I said, you got to get out and stay with this airplane while it gets fixed. And I'm going to take your jet and move on to San Diego. Okay, so that was my worst emergency. I had a couple of engine emergencies. One time I did a single engine cat shot with Petro. And I have to give Petro credit. He perfectly executed the single engine catapult procedures. He kept the nose down, fed in rudder, and we flew around. We flew away slowly, accelerated as we could on one engine and afterburner, and climbed away. Then we spent about the next hour trying to reduce our fuel to landing weight. And the terrible thing about that one was the fuel was trapped on the side with the bad engine. So we were burning all of our fuel out of the side with the good engine. And it's not supposed to work like that. There's supposed to be fuel interconnects, but it didn't work. And in the very end of that, we came back to land on the carrier with, we had less than, I don't know, we probably had about 7 minutes of fuel remaining, which is not where you want to be. That's the fuel that we could get to. And we had, an hour and a half worth of fuel that we couldn't get to, which was probably 5,000, 6,000 pounds. So we landed, and when we landed, they discovered that the engine had just failed, a central component. And actually, Petro and I wrote an article about that, and we posted it on the Aviation Geek blog. And that went up there a couple of months ago. Petro did a great job of recalling the details of it. Okay, so the question about that strike, knowing there were people on the ground, because I mentioned a strike in Southern Watch, I guess I left out a key word, and I did not mean to be deceptive because, but the fact is it was a practice strike. So we did not actually attack any targets. We flew a realistic strike. As always, everyone was always armed with live, real weapons, but we didn't drop anything on that day. So it was a practice strike. Okay, did I think the F-14 was unfairly treated, retired and replaced by inferior airplanes? I'm just reading the question as they're coming in. I love the F-14. I think it was a great airplane, but it was unfortunate that it was decided in the early 90s to move forward with the Super Hornet. I talked to the Super Hornet guys. That's a very impressive airplane in a lot of ways, and it can do its mission extremely well. It does not carry the Phoenix, but I got to tell you, it carries, it can carry what, 10 AMRAAMs. So, I'm not I'm not in the business of bad mouthing the plane that replaced me. Our airplane had its time on the stage. I loved it. I feel fortunate that I was an F-14 Rio, but I don't think the F-14 was mistreated. It just, it got replaced. Okay, so did I ever fly with Hoser or Snort? And I'm checking these other admin notes. So it looks like the sound and everything's good for people. So one note from Mike, aircrew interview, I've got my sound turned way down. So if you need me to turn up the sound, Mike, send me a note that says, "Bio, turn up your sound," because I can't hear anything. I'm just reading the questions. Okay, back to the program. I never flew with Snort or Hoser. And I know both of those guys. I've met them. I've only met Hoser one time many years ago. And I never flew around him, but I know guys that I respect, and they claim that, he may be the best F-14 pilot. Okay, so that's an excellent, that's an excellent commendation. In terms of Snort, I used to watch Snort fly the F-14 in doing the air show practice. And Snort could get out there. And one reason I watch him, and when I watched him, I was a squadron commander with, more than 2,000 hours in the jet. And when I looked at the schedule and it said Snort is flying the air show practice, I would go out and watch him because he whipped that plane around like it was just incredible. On the other hand, I flew with a lot of guys who don't have the public profile that Snort and Hoser have, and guys that were very impressive Tomcat drivers. One guy, for example, I remember was Boomer Wilson. Probably few people have heard of Boomer Wilson, but he was one of flying with Hoser on the AIM-Val ACE-Val test. And I flew with him when he was an air wing commander. And I just remember we were doing a long-range simulated strike. This was back in the late 80s. So the Tomcats weren't carrying bombs. We were just escorting A6s. Simulated strike. It was just for training. We were expecting aerial refueling, which we didn't get. And so we're flying in mill power. And we got jumped by some A4s, A4 Skyhawks. And anytime you get jumped, you want to have afterburner so you can get the max performance out of your plane. Boomer, however, was limited to mill power. He takes that plane up in the vertical, and I'm going, oh no, this isn't going to be good. But Boomer was so smooth and so good that we just go up, start a vertical, A4 comes in, Boomer goes into the vertical to start getting angles on the guy. I should use my models, but I'm almost done. And he comes around and we get the shot, and I'm going like, God, that was impressive. Anyway, I flew with other guys. I flew with JOs. I'm not going to throw any names out right now because I'll leave somebody out. Okay, I'll say one guy. I flew with a brand new guy, Pager. Pager showed up on the deployment when I was a senior lieutenant in VF2. He was brand new out of the RAG, and he shows up, and he was a very good pilot. And I mean, and he's brand new, and he just kept getting better and better. And he was so good that while he was new, the other pilots in the squadron wanted to fly against him just to test him. And Pager did a great job, and I was very fortunate. You know, I was his Rio. So we got a lot of ACM on deployment, a lot of day flights and day carrier landings, and Pager did a great job. So he actually went on to become a Top Gun instructor himself. But again, I'm only mentioning a couple of names that I flew with, but I mean, there were great pilots, East Coast, West Coast, Japan. There were great pilots all throughout the fleet. So thanks. But Snort and Hoser, yeah, they're good ambassadors for the Tomcat community. Did I ever fly with Bozo? For those who don't know Bozo, Bozo was the F-14 lead for filming the movie Top Gun. And the only flying I did with him when I was in a black MiG-28. Can I talk about that? MiG-28? Yeah, I was in a black F-5F MiG-28 for filming scenes for Top Gun. I never flew with Bozo because I was an instructor when I knew him. I've done a panel discussion with him since then, and I can tell you the guy is he's very sharp, and he tells a great story, and he's got a lot of great stories to tell. So Bozo is another good ambassador for the Tomcat. Did I ever get to do any flying with helicopters? No. We talked a lot about what to do if you face a helicopter that's armed with air-to-air missiles, and we knew that it was a dangerous threat. I don't recall ever flying with helicopters. The most unusual thing like that I flew against was Harriers. And we were expecting these, and these were Marine Corps Harriers. And we were expecting them to not be very capable because, you know, like we're Tomcats and they're just little mud-moving Harriers. And these guys came in, and one, that jet is tiny. So it's very hard to keep sight of. And two, they flew a nice jet. They did not do any unusual Harrier moves that I know of. They kept their knots up, and they pulled hard, and so they put up a good fight. What was the most demanding aircraft flown, and why? I would have to say that's the F-14. They only picked the very best to fly F-14s. Okay, I'm exaggerating. That's a very hard question to answer because there are different environments. I don't know of many people who would say a jet is easy to fly or easy to fly well. You know, you might think that the E-2 Hawkeye is easy because its mission is primarily, you know, flying radar orbits. But then the guy's got to come back and land on a carrier in a large airplane that, like the Tomcat's, got a lot of moving surfaces and a lot of control activation. So I can't really say what's the hardest plane to fly.
Okay, Bio, can you hear me right now?
That one thing that because I've talked to a Super Hornet Wizzo, I can say that all of the technological advances that have gone into the Super Hornet, the improved radar, and these other features, I asked this guy, I go, you know, I felt like I was doing okay in my F-14. Once I got fully qualified, I was able to operate all the systems. So I asked this guy, I go, is it all worth it? He said, yes. And he told me an excellent reason. He said that the Wizzo now can spend less time tweaking the radar and spend less time doing this mechanical management of his sensors, and spend a lot more time contributing to the big picture, mission accomplishment, air battle management, etc. So that doesn't mean that the planes are easier to fly, but it does mean that our technology is helping us.
So, Bio, can you hear me right now?
Okay, guys. A guy is telling that over here in the UK, helicopters like to play tag with typhoons, hawks, tornadoes, and helicopters and all that. I know it's good training, and certainly if you get out on the battlefield and you and you encounter armed helicopters, they're going to do whatever they can to try to stay alive. But just when I was in my training, we just really did not have very much cause for fighting against helicopters. Oh, did I ever do display flying as a Rio? Some guys like to fly a lot of air shows. I did, one or two commemorative flybys, but by choice, my own choice, I never flew in an air show. I just didn't want to do that. I would much more prefer doing a 2V unknown or a 4V unknown. I just didn't want to fly in air shows. So no, I can't say that I ever did any display flying. I mean, a couple of guys, Smokin' Joe, who I believe was the Rio in the last Tomcat demo. He's another guy who's an excellent ambassador for the Tomcat community. He writes great articles, and he's a very perceptive and positive Rio. And so I know that when he was flying in an air show, it was probably very similar to being in a combat or a combat training situation, because you've got to be extremely aware of your surroundings, of your flight parameters. Your crew coordination has to be at its very best. Otherwise, you can get in trouble. And guys have proven that. Fortunately, there have been a lot of lessons learned, but decades ago, when people had maybe were not as prepared as they should have been, there were some unfortunate accidents at air shows. So, okay, how did the actors of Top Gun movie climb into the Tomcat? Did they need an additional ladder? Someone's feeding me lines here, so thank you for that. Most of the actors that filmed the movie were normal height, and so they had no trouble getting to the F-14's boarding ladder. The boarding ladder reaches pretty close to the ground, so they were able to do it. I showed them the proper way to climb the ladder, because there is a way to do it so you look like a professional when you get to the top of it. But let's see, did you fly the A or also the B? I hear the D is the Tomcat as it should have been. And that goes back to something I said earlier. I flew A's and B's, a little bit in B's, but 99% of my flying was F-14A models. And I agree with you. The D model was the Tomcat that should have been. Okay, here's somebody. I read your 2 books. Thank you for that. Are you going to write a 3rd book? And the answer to that is yes. I kept my 1st and 2nd book. I kept them very quiet when I was working on them, because when you're writing a book, or at least in my situation, you don't know, how long it's going to take till you're finished and how long you're going to take to get published. But I will say that now I'm working on a 3rd book. Don't hold your breath. It's going to be at least a year or more till I finish it. Just because that's how long it takes for me. But thanks for asking. And when that book does get closer to publication, I'll be sure I put something out on the internet. Is there a jet that you had liked to have flown but didn't? That's a great question. Thanks, James. And the other thing is, I guess you can all see this. We have 12 minutes left. That's good. 12 minutes left to ask questions. Okay, is there a jet that I would like to have flown but I didn't? When I was young and bulletproof, I really wish, sometimes I wish that I had been a pilot so I could have flown something like the F-8 Crusader. Maybe I got a little bit of a feel for that when I was flying the F-5F, because it is a small, reasonably powerful jet. But I mean, I can just imagine flying the F-8. I just think it's a cool airplane. I wish that I had made the effort to fly in an F-16 and an F-18 just so I would have that experience. On the other hand, I did get a few familiarization flights in F-4 Phantoms, and I was I was glad that I did that. Proud that I can say I've got some Phantom time. And they were tactical training. They were multi-airplane ACM training. And, you know, it was a good jet, but also it made me appreciate the F-14 for several reasons. One is the F-14's automatic wings. You get engaged, the wings come out, you get a lot more lift. And another is the rear cockpit in the F-14's got such great visibility. And the Phantom, you know, it's got the high-speed canopy. You don't have nearly the visibility that you do in the Tomcat. But of course, I've got tons of respect for the Phantom, and we fought them, and they were always a very good training flight. Did I ever take part in the Mother competition? The Mother was the informal F-14 community competition, where the head of the West Coast RAG selected either the best or the most colorful, whatever the criteria was, best or most colorful F-14 squadron, and awarded them a trophy. And I sure did take part in it. Everybody, almost everybody in every squadron did if they had a role. And I did that in VF-24, and I did it in VF-2. When I was in VF-2, we had the Mother for a while. I don't remember. Anyway. So, yeah, it was a lot of fun to do that stuff, competing against other squadrons just to try to do something that's colorful, positive, and amazing. In my opinion, will the F-35 fulfill the F-18's job? I think that one thing that my perception is that a lot of new airplanes get a lot of dirt thrown at them. I certainly know that was the case with the F-14 when it was new, because I was a teenager when it was new, and I remember those days. A lot of airplanes and get a lot of dirt thrown at them, and also these days, you know, people get more attention by criticizing things. I'm just starting to see some good firsthand pilot reviews on the F-35. So I hope that it fulfills the F-18's job. I know the F-35C, the Navy version, has larger wings. Hopefully it's got the endurance to perform its mission. And I also hope that it does a good job, because we've spent a lot of time and money developing these airplanes. So I want to hold my my comments on the F-35 till I learn a little bit more. Were there any pilots that you preferred not to fly with? I always thought it was tough to put your life in the hands of a pilot. That's a good question. That is, let's see. Okay, just a minute. Let me answer this. Sorry, I'm distracting myself by looking at these questions. You know, through the course of my career, there were just a few pilots that I didn't really get along with. And yeah, some pilots, they would probably say there were Rios they didn't get along with. I mean, I'm sure there were. But the majority of the pilots that I flew with, they'd been through the RAG training, and that was excellent training. Every squadron had, you know, standardization and observers and NATOPS checkers and things like that. And so pilots maintained a basic level of qualification. And the vast majority of them I was very comfortable with. Now, what I would rather say is there were a few guys who, in my career, I would go, this is a guy who, when I fly with this guy, everything goes better. I don't have to worry about anything. So there were exceptional pilots that I knew throughout my career. Yes.
So,
okay, who did I support in the last presidential election? No comment there. Did I ever intercept the Soviet Bears or bombers and fighters? Was it scary and fun? And Mike, I think, I don't know if Mike, if you can hear me, but
yeah,
it looks
can you
like
hear me
we're
now?
getting down to the last couple of minutes. So this may be the last question. I intercepted Bears several times. It was not scary. It was fun because it was different. I mean, the Bear is an impressive airplane. It's large. You can hear it from the cockpit. It makes so much noise. To me, it looks very industrial because it's, Soviet industrial looking. So it was fascinating to fly up next to one and to look at those guys and think they were our enemies. And also, when we briefed these flights, we reviewed our safety procedures. One, we said, don't put yourself into a situation where the Bear can cause you to lose control, because there had been stories where a Soviet airplane, I mean Soviet, this was back in the 80s, so they were Soviet, where they had gotten the escorting fighter slow, and then they turn into him when he's slow. And if he maneuvers to avoid a collision, he could depart the airplane. So the guys I was flying with, we were always very careful about that, and we were alert. We didn't want to allow them to mess us up. So it wasn't scary at all. A few times, my squadron mates, the VF2 guys, when I joined VF2, they had just come back from something that President Reagan, I mean, I don't know, Reagan didn't tell carriers exactly what to do, but he was the president. And the USS Ranger went right up near the Soviet Union back in 1987, I believe it was. And VF1 and VF2, maybe it was 86. Anyway, VF1 and VF2 got a lot of intercepts and a lot of video with floggers, Su-15 flagons, and maybe a couple of other types. I mean, because they were right off the coast of the Soviet Union. And so that was before I got to the squadron, and I watched that video, and I was just sitting there going, man, that would be cool. So most of my intercepts were Bears. One thing that I will say is read this book. Hope you guys can see that, or read this book. I'll just say read these books, and I'm not going to say anything else about them. Okay, and I think we might be about done just based on the timing. Mike, we can talk about it if we want to do one of these. They're fun. Oh, did I? Okay, I'll ask one more. I'll answer one more question. Did I ever become airsick? Yes, thank you. On my first 2 flights, I got airsick. I anticipated I would become airsick, so I had a barf bag. And luckily, as my training went on, I got over it. And I just remember, by the time I was in the fleet, I'm going like, man, I'm glad I'm over that. We can go out and do anything, and I'll be fine. Okay. Thanks, guys, for dialing in. I appreciate your questions. It's been nice talking to you. I'm going to go ahead and pull the plug.